keep your camera on, that's of course understandable. We are very pleased to welcome the European Education and Cultural Executive Agency and participants from higher education institutions, as well as national agencies from the 5 Nordic countries to this digital meeting today. We have, I think, over 100 registered participants, and I think that is an indication that this meeting is important for many of you who work with the Erasmus Plus centralized actions. But before I introduce our speaker, I will briefly mention some meeting rules. Please use your name and also set your microphone to mute when you're not speaking. If you want to keep your camera on, that's great, then we can see you as well. And if you have any questions during the presentation, you're welcome to write that in the chat as well. As you all know, the Erasmus program has entered a new period, and we know that the new improvements are often introduced during such a transition period. And one of the major changes is the introduction of the new lump sum based budget model in Erasmus centralized actions. And this new model opens up for autonomy and flexibility, but at the same time, it may also create some uncertainties which may not be clear or interpreted in a unison way. Thus, we have the pleasure of welcoming Kurt Jacobs, the head of the Department for Contractual and Financial Operations at the Executive Agency, to explain the rationale for the new model and give us and guide us towards a more informed and correct interpretation. And I'd like to give the word to you, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm very pleased to be here with you today. So, like was said, I will try in the next hour to share information from a practitioner, from my point of view, on, let's say, on the inside, working in the executive agency. We will cover Erasmus Plus centralized actions. I have created a PowerPoint presentation which is not too long, so I would like to leave enough time at the end to address your questions, and I would like to thank those of you who already have sent a written question. So I've tried to incorporate that already in the slides, and I will say a few words in one of the slides at the end about these questions. So maybe the next slide. So just to introduce myself, I'm working in the European Education and Culture Executive Agency in Brussels. On the next slide, you see the organizational chart of our agency. So you can move to the next slide. So our director is Mr. Roberto Carlini, and on the right side, you have the department led by Alessandra Lucchetti. And basically, I'm down there in unit B5, which is called Financial Operation. And the person you see there is basically my direct superior, Mr. Thierry Prost. So I deal with all kinds of financial audit, contractual matters for all programs in Erasmus Plus. So on the next slide, you see that we basically do the launch of the calls, we evaluate the applications, we do the financial management, we have the day-to-day contact with the beneficiaries, and we all do this mandated by the DGs of the European Commission, who are obviously responsible for policy making, for giving us the budget, the annual work program, and they also keep a close eye, they supervise what we do. And so we're basically, like the word says, we're executing, we're doing the execution, and in that sense, we are the first line of contact with grant beneficiaries. So we get all their questions when we launch the call, but we also deal with their questions when the projects are being implemented after the signature of the grant agreement. Next slide, please. So this is just the programs that are being managed in this, what we call multi-annual financial framework 2021-27. So we have 4 programs: the Erasmus Plus, Creative Europe, Citizenship, Equality, Rights and Values, and then European Solidarity Corps. I'm only working for Erasmus Plus, but I can tell you that what I will explain today is applicable also to the other programs in case they use the lump sum approach. Next slide, please. This is an important slide, and now we start a little bit with the important part of the presentation. And I have to say that the first bullet point, the financial regulation, this is the regulation which is also updated every 4 or 5 years, and it gives the financial rules that are applicable to the general budget of the European Union. So all what I will explain today, in fact, has as an umbrella this financial regulation. It's a quite long, I don't know, 250 page document, but it sort of sets the framework and the rules within which we have to operate and have to implement grants. We are talking today about grants. I think that's a very important point to stress, in the sense that contrary to procurement, whereby we decide what we want in terms of supplies or services or works or what have you, in grants, the purpose is to leave a lot of flexibility and room for creativity, innovation, and to the people who send applications for grant funding. And this is something very important, because how to say, if I do procurement and I want to buy equipment, and I give the terms of specifications, the terms of reference, and I want something which is perfect and something which works and which is, well, let's say, a quality product. And with grants, we always have to build in a kind of, how to say, we're not so, we hope that everything is successful when we give a grant to a project, but we also have to accept that not everything will work out as planned in the beginning. So we work with an application with an estimated budget, and towards the end of the project, we hope that the project is successful, but this is not always guaranteed, and that's why it's grant funding. I think this is a very important thing to be aware of, also from the higher perspective. In terms of grant funding, the budget-based model is the one that was used the most in the past, and it's called budget-based, or it's called actual costs or actual incurred cost, and that's the one that the Commission used the most in the past. There's another model which is more based on unit cost, which is, for example, used on joint masters, Marie Curie scholarships for doctoral fellows, and which I think works, in my personal opinion, quite well. So that's a good model for scholarships to master or doctoral students. And then the third bullet point here is the lump sum that we'll talk about today. There are a few other types of funding. I will not talk about them today because they are very, very specialized, but you can find them also in the financial regulation. Model grant agreement. This means that over the last few years, the Commission has done an enormous effort to harmonize not only the IT system, like the funding and tenders opportunities portal, but also the contractual documents. And I think this effort is extremely worthwhile and beneficial also to the beneficiaries, because we try to to avoid having too many different type of grant agreements with different articles or different conditions, which creates what I would call a sort of legal uncertainty for the applicants and then later on for the ones who sign a contract. So the model grant agreement is something very, very important. It also answers a question that already came before this this digital session. Is like, well, will Erasmus Plus then work in a different way than Horizon Europe? No, I would say for 99% it's the same lump sum approach. So because it's also for 99 or 98% the same model grant agreement. In the past, the grant agreement could be quite different, I would say. It was still based on a similar model, but different DGs and agencies had more flexibility to adapt it to their own needs. Now, the grant agreement, the contractual document, is much more centralized. So next slide, please. Could you move to the next slide, please? Yeah. Okay. So why are we using lump sums? It's because we believe there is a simplification potential, because we know that if we have grants based on actual cost, then the reporting at the end is quite cumbersome and complex, because most of these grants are with partners or consortia across Europe or even outside of Europe, and they all have to send their, let's say, cost claims and their cost information, their cost reports to the coordinator, who has to put everything together and send, that's what we call a final financial report. And if anything goes wrong and there's something misrecorded, then that is a problem in case there is a financial audit at the end. So this is obviously a lot of manual work, I imagine. And so that there's a risk involved. Now, when we go to lump sums, we will no longer have an interest at the final report to ask for the actual incurred cost. And we will also then, because we don't ask for a report about the cost, we will also not do a financial ex post audit. And so that, let's say, relieves a little bit the pressure at the end, and it also reduces the administration in terms of reporting. The exchange for doing that is that we will focus more on performance, more on the content of the project, more on the deliverables, the outcome. And so I would say it becomes more important in the beginning, at the stage of the application, to build a sound budget, a sound plan with work packages, with sort of good ideas about what one wants to achieve and what will be the role of each partner in the project. Next slide, please. There are basically two options in terms of lump sum. One is that we fix the amount of the lump sum already in the call for proposal, and the second option is whereby the candidates, the applicants, build their own project. Basically, they make a budget and they send the budget together with their application. Next slide, please. This first option, where does the amount of this fixed lump sum come from, is decided by the Commission. So how it works in practice is that we would look historically, or other ways, at historical data. We will look at hundreds of projects we have financed in the past, and successful projects, and we say, like, okay, if we want applicants to do this type of project, then on average we see that it will cost 60 to 70, 75,000 euro in actual incurred cost. when we do such a kind of study on historical data, we have to present it internally in the commission, and several people, legal service, DG budget, people look at that. They scrutinize the methodology that we have used, and in the end, the decision is taken. Of course, if we take that on average, it takes 60 or 75,000 euro to do a small project, then we could, for example, propose a fixed lump sum of 50,000 euro, whereby we still make sure that we are co-financing, that we leave some self-financing for the grant beneficiaries themselves. What it means is then that we get the proposals whereby people just describe in a narrative part, but also in an annex to their efforts and resources that they intend to, let's say, to put in, to mobilize for this 50,000 euro as an example. And in the end, we ask them to split the lump sum per work package and per beneficiary. Now, this split of lump sum per work package and per beneficiary is obviously very, very high level. It's just a few lines, a few work packages, maybe 3 or 4. Maybe there are also not so many beneficiaries, maybe 4 or 5. So in fact, the budget with the lump sum per work package per beneficiary will become something very, very high level, very simple. So now how do we make sure that we get the best value for money is because we know that there will be competition among proposals. And of course, if we have 100 proposals and we only select the 20 best ones for this fixed upfront lump sum of 50,000 euro, then we have a reasonable chance of success and also of selecting those projects which are worthwhile for funding. So we know upfront that what we give, the fixed lump sum, should normally be a good approximation of what it will cost to do what we ask for. And then by having the competition, sometimes a bit strong competition between competing proposals, we know that we should get good value for money. This lump sum is quite straightforward because people just ask for the 50,000 euro in an example, or if it's a bigger project, it can be 200,000 euro or 300,000 euro, and then we will just evaluate all the proposals and select the best ones, and those just get the upfront fixed lump sum. So there's no need for the beneficiaries, in this case the applicants, to send us together with the application a budget table or to fill in a budget form. There's no need under this option to do that. So because we have fixed the amount upfront. And so we also tell, of course, because I mean, I always give the example of feasibility study or a business plan in the research environment. We give a certain amount, and yeah, we just look at the proposals we get for that amount of money. But there is a study, so there is a kind of some data gathering, there's some methodology behind, but that is not shown or that is not seen by the applicants. But it has to be taken, of course, seriously on our side, and in fact, it's the European Commission that decides on this. Next slide, please. Because the second option is a little bit more complex, because here the applicants have to propose the budget themselves with a detailed estimation of the cost. It's same, the expert will assess, evaluate all these costs and make recommendations. Recommendations would be that, for example, there is some errors or there are some ineligible costs in the budget proposal, or there are some doubles, or there are some excessive costs, and these things, what have you. The final lump sum is fixed for those of you in the applications and e-grants. Once they get a notification letter that their project has been selected, they go into grant preparation phase, and at this stage we will fix the lump sum. When we say work package, What does it mean? Well, in our terminology, we call it a major subdivision of the project. It is not one activity, it's not one task, so it's a group of tasks. It's normally not a percentage of work progress, it's also not the activities in the first year, but I always say that it should be, a work package should be just a logical part of the project, and there can be work packages happening at the same time. The work packages can be chronologic, so you finish one work package and then it allows you to move to the next one. And of course, you will have always work packages that maybe run for the whole duration of the project. Next slide, please. This is an important slide because I want to reiterate that the basic principles and the approach is not so different from the budget-based or the actual cost approach. Why is that? There are differences, and we'll come back to that in a few moments. But in fact, we use the same evaluation process, the same award criteria, the payment scheme is the same. When in the lump sum approach, and I talk about the option 2, people have to present the budget, they have to use the same cost categories and the same rules on eligibility of cost as in a budget-based application. So you have staff cost or personnel cost, you have equipment, you have travel, you have financial support to third parties, what have you. Also, the periodic reports are the same. The little difference is that we will focus more on the completion of work packages. The last bullet point on this slide is again this thing what I said in the beginning between grants and procurement, that like in the budget-based grants, we hope that the outcome is successful, but the payment is not necessarily linked to a perfect execution or a complete success for this grant. It means that we want to see the completion of the activities, of the tasks, of the work packages, and we hope obviously, that's why we give the grant funding, that everything will be successful, but we're also realistic. And I always compare this with the example of giving a scholarship to students. We always try to give scholarships to those students that we think are most deserving or who are in need of the scholarship. Could be another reason. But we are not obviously asking them to repay the scholarship if for whatever reason they would fail their exam and not get their degree or their diploma. So it's really about a best effort. Yeah, and so not the end result is important, and we hope it's a success, but the payment itself is not linked to only successful outcomes. Next slide, please. Like I said, the cost estimations are similar to the budget-based grants. What does it mean? That if a cost item would be eligible in an actual cost grant, it will also be eligible in a lump sum grant, option 2. It must be reasonable and not excessive. And of course, it must be in line and necessary for the activities proposed in the project proposal. So this is just, I would say, common sense, but we'll come back to that in a little bit more detail in the next slide. So please, if we can move to the next slide. If we want at a later stage, I can, not now, but I could share my screen and show you this this budget form in more detail. This is just a screenshot. I don't know if it's maybe it's too small print and it's not readable, but today when we have lump sum option 2, we have to ask the applicants to fill in an Excel workbook, and in the future this will be replaced by an IT module in the SEP part of eGrants. You see here that you have on the left side, the left column, you have all these cost categories: personnel, subcontracting, purchase cost, what have you. Of course, also indirect cost, which is always fixed at 7% exactly as a flat rate. What I want to say about this slide is that it's, in my point of view, if we start with staff cost, for example, you will see that this is per partner or per beneficiary, per partner in the consortium. So you can put the cost per unit for staff, for a certain type of staff, be it an administrator, a professor, an assistant, administrative clerk. You can choose a number of types of people who will work for the project, and you can also establish the cost per unit. I think in this model it's probably per day, or if it's not per day, it's per month, and then translation will happen, but I think it's per day. And so the cost per unit is to be put beneficiary by beneficiary. So this allows for beneficiaries that applicants that are in, let's say, in those parts of Europe where the living standards are a little bit lower, to put a lower cost per unit, and for those who are more in the north of Europe, for example, or where have you, that to put a higher cost per unit, let's say a cost per day. These are obviously averages, so we don't want, well, we don't want, you are allowed to do what you want, but the thing is that the idea here is to put an average cost per unit. This is your best estimate that you can put for the cost per unit. The experts that evaluate this, they have tables and they have data, statistical data, to see if this cost per unit is a ballpark figure, is about right. So they will see, especially when it is excessive, when it's exaggerated. When it's exaggerated, we think it's not good. We don't get good value for money, and probably the expert will make a comment about that. But again, if the cost per day would be, I say something, 300-400 euros, and somebody puts 410, then it's fine. If somebody puts 800, it will raise some eyebrows, and people, experts, will write something about it. I personally always say, don't focus too much work or attention on the cost per unit. Try to use an approximation, an average for the different type of staff cost, but focus on the units, because the units is that what you think the inputs, the work inputs, here it could be the 50 days to accomplish the work package, because that's important even more, because if you don't manage in 50 days to deliver that work package, then there's obviously a problem, because you will have to invest more units, more days. So I think, but again, this is a personal opinion, it's a little bit more important to focus on the units than on the cost per unit. So don't spend too much time on the cost per unit. It should obviously not be excessive. Now, on the slide, you see as well that there are a number of commission decisions that I put the numbers there on the slide that give you ideas about, for example, travel, hotel, and per diem that we strongly suggest you use, and that could be used for the unit cost. And the same for volunteers, and if you would use SME owners. Next slide, please. So when we work with this detailed budget table in the beginning at application stage, and during the evaluation, this estimation of cost is scrutinized and evaluated, assessed by the experts. At the end, once we sign the grant agreement, this is how it becomes. So all the level of detail is sort of disappearing, and what we see is the work packages, in this case 8, in this case 4 partners or 4 co-beneficiaries working together on the project, and we see the share of each of them in each of the work packages. Again, there's no minimum or maximum in terms of work packages. It's also not mandatory that everybody works on every work package, but this is a little bit how it looks like in, let's say, the budget annex, the Annex 2 of the model grant agreement. But so the level of detail that was used during the evaluation disappears and is transposed or translated in a very simple overview table like the one you see on the screen now. Important to note is that the lump sum, the 3 million here in this example, is really the maximum. So this is not different from the past, because also in the past, when you had a budget-based grant, the funding, I would say an European university project of 2019 or 2020 that got 4 million euro grant from the executive agency, could do a project of 8 million euro. So they could do a project which was much larger than was presented at the application, but the maximum grant amount would stay 4 million euro. So with the lump sum, this is exactly the same thing. So the project in the end can deliver more, can have more outputs, can have more activities, even potentially could do much more than what is written in the work packages and as the deliverables and everything, but still we can never give more grant funding. So that is a maximum that is still written in the grant agreement. If we move to the next slide, then this is also important, is that we can do amendments during the life of the project. I give two examples here. I would like to stress that all budget transfers for lump sum grants need a written amendment that has to be introduced in e-grants, and that should be, let's say, approved by the Commission or the executive agency. The two examples here are the two green arrows. So if we want to put some money from one work package to another, it's possible, but we could also, because at the beginning, when we put in the application, we said that for work package 6, beneficiary D would not do an input, but we can decide on a 3-year duration project that after the second year, we want to make an amendment because beneficiary A has too much on its plate and wants to give part of the money that was foreseen for beneficiary A in work package 6 to beneficiary D. So this is all possible. So this is a difference, of course, with the actual cost of the budget-based model, because there the flexibility to decide who will do what remained a little bit with the consortium. So you didn't always have to tell the Commission or the agency, and you could sort of make these changes a little bit on your own. Here, whenever you start changing something between the work packages and you change this annex, whatever you want to do, you have to request an amendment. And normally, and there are some few conditions, if it's well justified, and then it will be accepted. So on the next slide, yeah, there are no financial audit because there's no financial report at the end. We also don't request to send any information about staff cost, employment contracts, travel invoices, equipment, the procedure, the tendering procedure for buying equipment or service contracts. All this. We don't want to see that, but we can still do, and this article remains, we can do check reviews and audits, performance audits, project reviews. Depends a little bit on what will be decided, but we can still look and ask for a review of the implementation of the project. But this will not be a financial audit, so there will be no audit firm coming normally to your offices, or if it's an audit firm, they will not do an audit, but they will do more a check, a kind of more a content-based, a technical review of the project, but it would not be the traditional financial audit. Now, you all know that there are intellectual property right obligations, obligations to show that the project is funded by the EU. And in case you use, for example, financial support, then there are certain rules and conditions that you tell us up front, and that we would like to see that if you give financial support, which is another word for scholarships or grants, cascading grants, that you give grants within the project to other end beneficiaries, that we would like to see that these obligations or conditions are respected. So next slide, please. Yeah, that was something. Yes, thank you. So in terms of ex post controls, this is it also answers a question that was posed in the beginning before this session today. No timesheets. Well, you can of course always keep timesheets just for internal purposes at universities or in your organization. I think that's certainly a best practice, but we will not ask for that, and we will not ask for all these other documents, supporting documents. But on the left side of the slide, you see that we would like to see any document proving that the work was done, as explained in Annex 1, which is the description of the project, and which is basically the whole narrative of the lump sum grant. Next slide, please. Yes, these are, I'm almost at the end of the presentation. These are some questions that we got in before the meeting. How about the co-financing? The co-financing is fixed in the call for proposals. I mean, it can be 80%, 70%, so people just have to see what it's what is written in the call, and how to split it among partners. Well, I think when you fill in, when applicants fill in, not you, but when applicants fill in this this budget form with the lump sum option 2 approach, in the end, we will have the total cost of the project, let's say 1 million euro, and if the co-financing is 80%, then the grant given will be 800,000 euro. We will not oblige, check, or in any way ask you to ask applicants or beneficiaries to report about how they organize the co-financing or self-financing among partners. We are not gonna ask questions about that, so that's flexible or free. Should we use different staff categories on the personnel cost and this? Yes. Should we use 20, 25 different staff categories? I would say no. Maybe try to limit to the most common cases, maybe 3, 4, 5. Let's not overdo things. How about yes, an average daily rate per partner per type of staff category? Yes, it is obviously an average. It's an approximation. Timesheets are not requested. Record keeping is all about outcome deliverables and showing that the activities really did take place. In terms of calculating or estimating the travel cost, there is this Commission decision 2021-35 that I had on the other slide that you can look up. And in there you will see that the European Commission did a study, and it has now unit costs for different, let's say, travel bans within Europe for flights or train travel or what have you. And similar things exist for hotel or per diem. And so we did that study. It's obviously not perfect. It will not fit all purposes, but it gives, it is a basis that you can use. And in fact, that we recommend that you use. But of course, this is always difficult to foresee in the beginning of a project. But I think for the experts, it's important to analyze if travel is needed. And yeah, I mean, I think it's all a little bit common sense. how to plan project deliverables, and should applicants lower their expectations? Well, it's the risk with this approach of lump sum is obviously that you promise a lot and you don't foresee enough resources, be it in the unit cost or in the units, in the number of days, for example, that you would have to invest to come to the deliverable or to come to the completion of the work package. And there is a risk involved there. Now, of course, if you put very few deliverables and you're a little bit unambitious, then of course, compared to other applications that are, let's say, a little bit more ambitious or that are more efficient, and you will probably score, or applicants would score lower. So I think it is a bit, don't set your goals too high, but also don't set them too low, because it's a competition among proposals, and of course then you will probably not be selected. Yes, there are different socioeconomic realities among different countries. We normally advise that when you do the budget form for the lump sum option 2 approach, that you use actual cost, average cost, but based on an actual reality. So if you have 3 partners in high living standard countries and 3 partners from countries with low living standard, then this should be a little bit reflected, because the budget form that I showed is beneficiary by beneficiary. So the daily rate for staff in a country with a lower living standard should be much lower than the one in another country with a higher living standard. So now, of course, once your proposal has been accepted and you start working on these work packages, there is no request anymore to report on the actual cost, and there's no timesheets, and there's no scrutiny anymore about who's doing what and who's doing what at what price, at what cost. So once you sign a lump sum grant, there's a lot of autonomy and flexibility among the consortium to organize that. The only thing that we will be interested in towards the periodic report or the final report is the outcomes, the deliverables, to see that the work packages are completed. We will not want to know or need to know who did that work. We still, of course, if we have a consortium, we hope that all partners and bring in their expertise and their knowledge, and that it's a cooperation, and that everybody will have worked together on this project, because also that's why the project was selected with this consortium setup. But of course, we're not gonna ask or scrutinize if what costs were recorded in which country and for which type of staff, and if that was all in line or even close to what the initial budget form or the initial budget proposal said. So this we will not look into. So also for the co-financing, how that is organized within the consortium, or who contributes what from their own resources, we don't ask. So it's I would say it's very flexible in that sense. Now, is this new program aligned with Horizon 2020? Or that was the previous one, Horizon Europe financial guideline? Yes, it is. I mean, Horizon research programs had this guarantee fund. They have a few other things. This I will not explain because it becomes very technical. I cannot say that Erasmus Plus is 100% the same as the Horizon Europe financial guidelines, it's very close. I mean, it's almost the same model grant agreement coming from the legal service of the European Commission. And so the lump sum approach and how we will deal also with the final report and the completion of work packages and how we will assess that, it will all be very much in the same way, in the same manner. On the next slide, I think this is more a slide to conclude a little bit. Again, this is for my a little bit from my personal point of view. It's not a revolution; it's an evolution. It's more or less the same process, especially in the beginning, up until the signature of the grant agreement. But on the second bullet point, you see that there is more focus on cutting up the project into a clear plan with work packages, with steps, with milestones, with things that the applicant wants to achieve, and that he will have to report on. So the reporting is not anymore on financial things, and so there's also no, let's say, risk that people, all the different partners, report something wrongly, and also all the work that was invested in the past in doing all these administration about keeping timesheets and making sure that all the partners were living up to the same standards in terms of keeping track of all the supporting documents. That burden has fallen away, and so I think maybe on the next slide, I think it was my last slide, if I'm not, yes. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and I apologize for going a little bit over the time. But I think it's a lot to cover in a short period of time, and the devil is always a little bit in the details. So I'm willing to listen to your questions, and I will try to answer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think this has been both very interesting and very helpful and useful to everybody. And I think even though everything was very clear, it has generated some more questions I see from the chat. So I think we will move into the sort of the second half of this webinar, and I think I will give the word over to my colleague Eva, and she will lead you through the next part of the program and open up for questions and reflections. Eva?
Yeah. Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation explaining the logics of the new lump sum budget model. And we are very pleased to have you in this meeting, and we are very grateful that you are staying until the very end and listening to our discussion part and exchange of experiences. And we know that this part is very important for many participants because we know that some of our participants have already delivered applications following the new model, and some of them probably writing applications for the next deadline. And getting some insight from those who have experienced this is very worthwhile. So we have asked one of our most experienced participants or experts, Gard Ditlestad, to share some perspectives about this model. And Gard has a long experience working with the European Commission, and he has been a national expert for the Digital Europe program, I guess, and before. And he is also working very closely with Erasmus Plus program. And he was actually the first one to call us at the very beginning and raise some questions about how we should apply this model correctly. So we know that he has a lot of insights and perspectives, and we have asked him to share a kind of user perspective talk from this point of view, which we hope will be interesting for many.
So thank you, Eva, and hello, everyone. Can you hear me clear? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Good, good. I just had to ask since there was some noise disturbance. However, this is not an evaluation of the lump sum model. It is more some fragments of observations and reflection. Maybe food for thoughts for some of you. And next slide. The first perspective is, in fact, as an applicant. And the context was to apply for the Erasmus Plus capacity building call launched in November 2021. 4 European partners, 6 in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, 3 observations, all partners were well prepared. But the change to lump sum was unexpected, and a new consolidation among partners was needed, which in fact took quite a time. The second, we felt, many of us, that we did not have any solid ground under our feet anymore. I should have loved to listen to the presentation that you all just heard before we applied, but we didn't, and we did not have any handbook on the lump sum funding model. Now, so we had to look into, okay, based on actual costs, but how should we build it up? Should we use rates? And all these questions that was just discussed. One very specific observation is, of course, when you start to build up based on different salaries, that is a very sensitive question. So we decided in the end of the day, whatever salary we put in, it should be directly comparable with the old Erasmus Plus rates. You know, the difference between countries. The third observation was using the Excel sheet that was specific for this call. I don't know if it is the same that is used now for other calls. That sheet required that the input for the budget was at least 10% own resources for co-funding. And I have to admit, that experience was not very good. It was like working with a wall. So simplification requested. That was the applicant perspective. Now, if you change the slide, please. Since I serve as an evaluator, which is a service I do with great pleasure, serve as an evaluator for the national agency on Erasmus Plus applications. The context now is applications for cooperation partnerships in 2022. 3 observations. Most applications had no explicit evidence of or clear justification of co-funding. So, you know, I had to look very carefully to see if there was any evidence for co-funding, and often you can find that going into details, do some simple calculation, etc., etc. But a bit disappointing that when going to a new model, you have no clear request for evidence for co-funding. Then we have a bit delicate question I will share with you, that is, since this evaluation was on Norwegian coordinators, and in several of the applications, the coordinator asked for 20% of the budget for project management, and according to guidelines, you have to justify why you do that, such a high amount project management. So there are many questions to ask here, because it could be because of differences in salary levels, labor costs. It could also be unbalanced resources. So why? I will come to that in a second. And then, of course, the question we all the time have to reflect on is the extent to which the project is cost effective and allocates appropriate resources to each activity, which is the work packages. Now, moving to the next slide, please, which is a kind of reflection points. But before that, sorry, this is a table which I promised to show you. And it illustrates the issue of labor costs and salaries. And only in Norway, here, if you look at each column, show the salary or the direct cost, or the direct cost plus indirect cost for a researcher in Norway. The first column is what you can calculate for a researcher, direct and indirect cost according to the guideline or the rate from the Norwegian Research Council. The second column is a straightforward calculation based on the average salary, direct cost for a researcher according to statistics, which is here 1 million Norwegian kroner. Or if you go to then the next, which is the rate that the Norwegian Research Council and NORAD, the agency for development, offer for a researcher based on a rate. It is the same for a doctoral student, for example. And the rate here, as you can see, is then 1,190,000 Norwegian kroner. For a doctoral student, that includes indirect costs, but not for a researcher. And then the tax agency also have a say here, because what is accept for a rate from a company, and here you can see the max rate is 1,295,000. Now, if you compare this with the old rates from the EU, the previous call, the rate, maximum rate for a researcher in Norway is about 500 Norwegian kroner. And my point here is that it is almost time more based on the rates from the Norwegian Research Council, and it is at the maximum about 50% what it costs to pay a researcher. So whatever rate you use here, you will be a bit in a problem, because if you use a typical middle rate, you will come very high for cost for salary, for example, for project management. Sorry for taking your time going in detail, but let me now close my comment with the last slide, please. For reflection only, lump sum is a step in the right direction, I agree. Lump sum puts pressure on the applicant and the partner's communication and negotiation skills, in particular the coordinator. And why? In particular, because of the salaries, the labor costs. That is, as I can see, the biggest challenge here. From an expert point of view, you put a requirement on the experts to have a very sharp eye for evidence and comparison when it comes to co-funding, co-financing. So a question here then, of course, for my friend in the European agency is, can these guidelines be improved significantly? And could more explicit information, in particular about co-funding, be requested from the applicant for the next course? Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing valuable reflections. And I see that Mr. Gordon Jacob, you have been listening very attentively to this presentation, and it seems that you have some comments that you would like to share as well, or give us some perspectives that complete this whole picture. Would you like to take the floor and share your thoughts?
Oh yes, there's been a number of comments here in the chat. I think that also we have time to open up for people to put the questions orally. But some of the questions are highly technical nature, and there seem to be a number of questions concerning travel and rates for travel. We had one first here from Verpiloma. What would be the correct unit and unit cost per unit in C1 travel? There are several different mobilities, different destinations, and many travelers in one work package per partner. And that one is also closely linked, I think, to the next question, that the distance band starts from 400 kilometers. What kind of financial support can be applied to domestic travelers or travelers with distance band under 400 kilometers? So this is somewhat different to the overall thoughts on lump sums, rather specific questions on travel costs. I think there was a third question on travel costs, and that is from C.R. Fishcone. Are recommendations to be strictly followed by the project beneficiaries, or can they devise their own unit cost for this budget heading? Thanks. Oh, so maybe we could start with those ones.
Okay. Well, thank you all for the questions. So I will maybe start with reacting to the slides that Gart presented and the last two questions that he raised. I'm already very happy that you said it was a step in the good direction, because we don't want to introduce something new that is let's say that is worse or than what we were doing in the past. Again, it's not so different from what we were doing in the past. But to say about these guidelines, you're absolutely right. I was myself already involved a few years ago, before the first calls were launched, and I've been doing an enormous effort internally within the executive agency and within the commission, with those of us who are familiar with how it works, to spread the knowledge and to spread how things need to be done. And I can just say that more and more guidelines, internal guidelines, but also external guidelines for applicants, are being written and are being edited and put for approval for senior management. And so we really hope that by the next series of calls for proposals, it will not be just in the question and answer session on the F-top in e-grants, whereby people can ask a question, and if enough people ask the question, then the people behind the call coordinators will launch an answer. That's a bit piecemeal, and I think we need to step up our efforts to make more comprehensive guidelines and let's say taking and leading the applicants by the hand and explaining this approach in much more detail. So I take the point, and I think well, what I myself and colleagues are doing is that we are now more regularly going to what we call info days for applicants, where we give this same type of presentation and we try to explain, we take questions from the floor, from the applicants. And so, but this approach was sort of introduced massively, I would say, in this MFF 2021-27, and I think our, let's say, our training effort is not yet up to speed, and we have to increase our efforts. So to that point, I fully agree, but I can confirm that a lot is being done behind the scenes to improve that part. So in terms of the co-financing proof, I'm personally not so much interested to know how the co-financing is organized, because I think when we assess a budget-based grant or lump sum grant, that we only look at the cost side and not at where the self-financing or the co-financing comes from. But that's maybe a technical point that we can discuss also bilaterally. In terms of the travel costs, it is written that it should follow the budget-based model. And for the budget-based model today, this decision, Commission Decision 2021-35, describes, I don't know, in 10, 12 pages, a number of travel bans and travel of certain destinations, and it gives the unit cost to use. And in fact, if I have to speak from a legal point of view, because I'm not a lawyer, it's almost it's mandatory to use this Commission Decision 2021-35. But I'm very pragmatic person, so if you have to build a budget for a lump sum, and like some of the people here in the audience asked the question, I mean, it's an estimation in the beginning. You don't even know who will travel and how many travels exactly, and how much will it cost. And now you have this inflation coming our way in the coming years. So I think when people put travel units, like a number of travel, and they choose a certain unit cost, it's averages, it's approximations. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it's also very difficult for the experts to evaluate. I think, of course, if in the description of the application in Annex 1 you put work packages and you don't mention travel at all, and then you put 100,000 euro for travel, then the expert will react and say, well, I mean, there seems to be no justification for traveling in this project, because the whole narrative, the whole application is about doing online meetings, and there's very little need for physical travel. And then there is this huge budget foreseen for travel. Well, that for me is a discrepancy, and that should be something that of course we cannot change applications, meaning we cannot go into a negotiation with somebody who puts an application. So for me, that would be something that is sort of like something in the application that doesn't fit between the work packages and the budget, and then the narrative or the activities of the work packages. So that is a problem. The other example I gave is that if we have daily rates as unit costs for staff, which are really excessive, I mean, then I think what we are seeing is that we can agree that it takes 30 days to write a report or to organize something or to do some activities. But if that costs €1,000 a day, and there are 21 working days in a month, we're paying a salary of 21 or 20,000 euro a month. That is probably excessive in most countries in Europe. And then if we know it comes from a partner based, I say something in Portugal or Spain, then of course this is excessive. So again, what I try to explain with this example is that from an evaluation point of view, we cannot go into the last detail. We have to take the proposal on its merit and to look at the description and how it's built and how it's explained, and what do people promise and commit themselves to do, and if that budget that they link to that is what I would say reasonable. But there again, so for travel costs, if you want to use physical travel, foresee a travel budget, give some indications, and those travel. I mean, if you say in the narrative that you just want 3 people to travel, and in the budget there are 20 or 25 people traveling, and there's again this discrepancy. If there is no discrepancy, then I think this budget will be accepted. And if it's accepted, then, like I said, it's translated in this Annex 2 in a work package per beneficiary, and all this level of detail, it just disappears in a blink of an eye. And then once we do the periodic or final report, we will just look at the completion of the work packages, and we don't look anymore at all these preparations and these actual costs, or these estimation of costs that were used in the beginning to get the project selected. So I think I would like to stop here and maybe try to answer some more questions.
Thank you so much. And it helps us to understand the logic of the new budget model. And it seems that consistency and alignment between the narrative and the work packages or working hours is one of the most important principles in the new model. And we would like to add this meeting is has a Nordic participation, and we would like to also invite institutions and national agencies from other Nordic countries to share their views. And I see that Anne-Sophie Kokkonen from the Finnish National Agency, she has already posted a comment, which she thanks you, Mr. Kurt, for a very interesting presentation, and for GARD, and for us organizing this webinar. But Anne-Sophie, you write that many of the questions that Finnish higher education institutions have has already been touched and answered today. And you see both challenges, but also the potential in the new model. Would you like to highlight some aspects that we have not yet spoken about? Please take your floor. I'll see your screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And it's lovely to see so many online here from around the Nordic countries. Well, as I said, I think it's always a challenge when we try to adapt a new model when we are applying for financing. And I think that can has been seen the last year, that even really beneficiaries that have a long knowledge of projects and building up the budgets for projects have had challenges when they try to renew how they do projects to the new lump sum model. But I think also that's something that we all are learning about, and with the help as well from the executive agency and commission, we are starting to also learn how to build up good projects within the new model. Also, a challenge is, of course, when we're moving from technically looking at the costs and what costs we have occurred and the audit of them, to moving to deliverables and the content and how that connects to our project. And that's, of course, a challenge now, I think, how to work up good work packages that you can deliver with the right deliverables. And I think that's a challenge right now, and us as well. And that's something beneficiaries are learning. And I think it was a really good comment that was here earlier, that it's a question of how you communicate with your partners and finding ways of cooperation and communication when it comes to building up your project with deliverables and the budgets. And I also think that when at the application stage already have to really start with this communication process, it will also be a great thing for the coming projects when they start actually working after receiving hopefully financing. And I mean, there's been many questions also of really technicalities, like how to count the costs per unit, for example, for the staff costs and so on. And that's, I think today we received a lot of helpful information on how we will be building that in the future and how the beneficiaries will be doing that. But we're excited to see what the new model brings and what the new Erasmus Plus program build brings with it in the centralized actions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I know that we have even more insights and comments on the chat. And Bart, would you like to read some questions?
We could pick a few questions on linked to work packages and reporting and transfers of funds, which I think have not really been touched upon. It was mentioned in the presentation that the amount is paid when activities and work packages are completed. And does that mean that no funds will be transferred at the start of the project? How are the project to report on completed work packages within this budget model? And how will you handle those work packages that logically go through the whole project period? The examples that were given in the program guide 2022 were very much traditional work packages going through the whole project period. And since there's now not going to be a financial audit, how will you assess the completement of work packages? What will happen if you conclude that it has only been partly completed? What will be the criteria for that assessment?
Shall I take this question now?
Yes, please.
Okay, so thanks for this very interesting question. And first of all, to explain, like for a normal budget-based grant, where you have what we call pre-financing, whereby we give money upon the signature of the grant agreement. For a lump sum grant, it will be exactly the same. So once the applicant signs a grant agreement, I give an example. He gets, if the total grant is 5 million euro, and the pre-financing set in the model grant agreement is, and it's also described in the call, is 80%. Then upon signature of the grant agreement lump sum, the coordinator will be getting 4 million euros in the account to disperse, to split among the partners and to start working. So the idea that is always underneath grants is that we want to advance the money for doing the work, and we don't normally want people to have to advance from their own pocket. So the whole idea of grants has always been, and it still is, also with lump sums, that the pre-financing is paid and is paid generously to make sure that the projects have enough money from this pre-financing to implement the project. Now the logic is always that you keep 10%, in most cases probably 10%, for the final report, as sort of as a small stick behind the door to say, like, please send us the final report and then we will assess everything. And so also for us in the commission and the agency, that the financial risk is not, that we haven't paid everything and we don't even know, the project has not even started. So the idea stays the same. Budget-based actual cost grant or lump sum, we pay a pre-financing 80 or 90%. So that should not be a problem. This pre-financing can in some cases be split, like 50% at contract signature and another 40% after 1 year or 1 year and a half, and then 10% for the end. This kind of payment schedule, it can change from one call to the other. But the idea behind this always to give enough money to the project to be able to incur all the costs. So in terms of reporting, our agency and under Erasmus Plus, we will work generally in most cases with only one periodic report, meaning one periodic report whereby people have to report on the completion or not of the work packages, and that only that periodic report at the end, so at the very end of the project duration. There is a possibility to do that also, let's say, halfway through during the project, to have like a periodic report midterm and to have one at the end. And again, I mean, we launch about 100 calls every year in our agency here, so I don't know them all by heart. So there could be some calls where this periodic report is split in one midterm and one at the end of the project duration. But from my impression, from what I've seen, in most cases, we will only ask the periodic report at the end. So that means that at the end, there is the need to report on the completion of the work packages. Now, I want to refer to the slide that I showed about amendments, because if during the implementation you think that something is not going well from the applicant, from the beneficiary point of view, I always suggest and strongly recommend to put in an amendment request and to justify why a certain work package has to be modified, changed. Maybe there is something that makes this work package suddenly during the life of the project not attainable, or there's something that has to be modified or changed, and for that we have the amendment request. And so I would certainly suggest to use that option and to go into a discussion with the project officer following the project within the commission or the agency, and to discuss that. This amendment request can be done in e-grants. It's all automatic, and so that is a first, let's say, line of defense. And then if we were to come to the end at the periodic report, at the final report, and we still have work packages that are not completed, then I think it all boils down to what is the reason and what is the justification for not completing a work package. And this is a little bit the things that I tried to put in my presentation about, yes, we want outcomes, but we cannot always guarantee successful outcomes. And so I think on our side, we will have to look at the work packages and read in the final report what has happened. And I give extreme examples, because extreme examples are always the easiest to understand. If a work package was foreseen in the beginning, and 3 partners would work on the work package, and this work package has not been completed at all, and in the final report no justification is given, like there was a reason why we could not do these activities, or why this work package is dropped off, then yes, we will not pay for that work package. And this is a little bit like we used to have in the budget-based actual cost grant, whereby in the beginning people present a project of 1 million euro, and we say we will give a grant of 800,000 euro, and at the end they come with a final report on a project of 500,000 euro. Well, obviously then we don't give 800,000, we give 400,000, half of that grant. So the idea is the same as with an actual cost grant, that also in the lump sum, if work packages are just not completed within the duration of the project for whatever reason, then, I mean, normally behind that, the cost should also not be incurred, and then there will be no, let's say, no payment linked to that work package. Now, another example is obviously when all that is possible was done to complete the activities of the work packages, and they were done, but there is a problem with the deliverables, because something didn't work out as was planned in the beginning, and this is explained also in the final report. And then I think it's a little bit the assessment at the final report stage, but I think that in those cases, it has to be seen, but for sure it will not be a yes/no story. Like let's say 80% of the work package, or imagine there are 4 deliverables, and 3 of the 4 have been done, and the 4th deliverable was not obtained or was not done. Of course, then there has to be a payment that is sort of in a way proportional to the achievement of the work package. So I think these are 2 examples to show that we have to find a way to work with this, and we have to be honest, little experience, because of course these lump sum grants are starting now, and we have, to be honest, I've not seen yet any final reports here in Erasmus Plus, so we will learn from the experience in the coming years. But I think we have to have an approach and whereby the people that are selected for grant funding and who do best efforts and who do everything possible, and who during the continuous monitoring of the project through e-grants and in discussions with their project officer explain what they are doing and how they are attempting to achieve the deliverables and the outcomes, and who then report that some things were not successful or not possible in the end, then I think we should not, it's like the example with the student. There will be students who failed some exams and don't get a degree, and we will not reclaim their scholarship. So again, I mean, we always have to look at concrete examples to give concrete answers, but I wanted to share these sort of more general ideas that to answer a little bit the question. But I think in some cases the work package, if it's not the work package not started, we don't pay. If the work package was almost completed and yeah, then we will certainly not say at the end, no, you didn't achieve 100% of the work package, you get 0% money or payment for that work package. That would be that would create an upheaval that would be very unfair, I must say. So.
Okay, thank you so much. And now our meeting is going to the end, to the very end, and we have 1 minute left. So I would like to thank Mr. Kurz and all other participants, higher education institutions, and stakeholders from that and other national agencies for finding time to join our meeting and using your morning hours to explain and to understand the new budget model. And we know that this is the very beginning, and we are going to work to hear more about this model, because as you say, Mr. Kork, that this is the central model which is going to be used in many EU programs like Horizon Europe and maybe Creative Europe and other programs. And having a detailed knowledge about that helps us and applicants to apply for the projects. So we have 4 quotes. 4 deadlines in September for Innovation Alliances and Teacher Academies and Centers for Vocational Education and Training, and maybe the new one, European Decree, coming up. And this will be very instrumental in writing new applications and following the development of this model. So once again, thank you very much. We will take care of the chat and your questions. And if something is left unanswered, or you still have comments, please send them to us, and we will see if we can get if we can clarify the answers. So thank you very much.